Welcome back. Outside Ireland, our major cities are struggling. But what are the problems, causes, and importantly, what are the solutions to getting what is known as rural Ireland back on its feet and thriving again? Joining me for this debate, Michael Healy Rae, TD, is staying with us, Allen Meagher, editor of Changing Ireland, Mary Hughes, president of the Irish Planning Institute, and journalist Eamon Delaney. Well, I'm not a believer, Eamon, in stating the bleeding obvious. I was on holidays in the west of Ireland and I walked through the main drag of Castlebar from one end to the other. I counted 26 commercial properties, closed, to let, run down, whatever, derelict. That's the Taoiseach's hometown, and that means political influence. So we know the problem. How do you think the government should be responding?
Well, it's not just the government, you're quite right, and it's not just a political solution. And the problem in this country is that everybody looks to the state to help and solve all our problems. So let's get beyond that. It's only part of it. We need commerce, we need enterprise, we need support for entrepreneurs, we need to think of ideas, or we need to help people in those areas all around Ireland, in villages and towns, near the coast and elsewhere, think of ideas of connecting to their heritage, their history, or resources they have, be it mariculture, be it agriculture, or whatever.
What's the impediment to that entrepreneur?
Well, there are many factors, but just going back to, there is something that the budgets can do, and like the government controls tax, and that's the ultimate thing. So there's a very interesting proposal coming up in front of the Fine Gael Parliamentary Party, put down by Michelle Mulhern from Ballina, and you talk about Mayo being in Castlebar there. So, and this was put down before the Parliamentary Party by her and other Fine Gael TDs, and some urban
to the effect of
that they want tax breaks for, like the Living City initiative, basically living over the shop. It basically, to simplify it, is all this dead space that you saw in towns, centres and village centres, to give tax breaks for them to be occupied by businesses, but also perhaps by residents.
Do you think it'll work?
I think it would. I think it would be a good incentive to revitalising and getting life back in. But with that, this proposal was dismissed, and I wrote angrily about it for the newspaper. But now it's back on in September. But there are other things that go with it, like a moratorium on rates to do with a business in a village or town which is expanding. There are many aspects to it.
In a word, incentives.
Incentives to so because we're crippling retail and small businesses still. I mean, I know there are already startups and grants and that, but there are high rates, there are high charges, there are stealth taxes. We need to do more, and that's what can be done for the
Mary Hughes, your perspective is planning. Could I put it to you that things like out of town large shopping centres have actually hollowed out main streets, and that planning has actually contributed to the problem?
In the context, Ivan, of out-of-town shopping centres, you're absolutely correct. They have caused devastation to a lot of the towns in rural Ireland, and indeed a lot of the cities as well throughout the country. But it's not only things like out-of-town shopping centres. I think we need to look and examine and see what's happening around the towns and villages. And we need to look at the kind of spatial patterns of where people are locating. And I suppose if you take into consideration the fact that in Ireland there are 400,000 single houses in the country, according to the Census of Population 2011, that is a quarter of the total housing stock comprises single housing. And I would contend...
Urban development.
Some of it, not all of it, it's single houses. A lot of it will be in the countryside. And I would contend that if you could divert that population into our towns and villages, then it would create the critical mass to occupy the vacant upper floors that Eamon referred to, and to create the critical mass to provide those services.
Surely that's no coincidence. I mean, the attraction of living in the country is you don't have the benefits of a city, but you do have more space, you do have a nice view and scenery. Of course people want single cottages and houses.
You're absolutely correct, and indeed a recent study completed in 2010 on behalf of the EPA confirms that the reason why people want to live in the countryside is for its physical attributes, is because they can have a bigger house and because it's cheaper cost of living. But that is not sustainable. The fact of the matter is that it is the cost of servicing dispersed rural housing in the countryside is unsustainable. For example, the postal service, it costs 4 times as much to serve a house houses in a rural area than it does in an urban area. In terms of capital infrastructure and the provision of, for example, telecommunication lines, is double the cost in a rural area as it is in an urban area. And I could keep going on and on with examples. And the argument is that if we could divert, I suppose, the unsustainable costs associated with that type of infrastructure and servicing in rural areas, divert that cost into providing the infrastructure in the towns, then we could be starting to find solutions.
Allen Meagher, you're editor of Changing Ireland, and my understanding is that your particular perspective is self-help, community development, community spirit, fighting back. What's your story? What's your solution?
Well, just to start with, I live in a place called Keogh's Cross, and it would be an example.
Where's that?
In Fedmore in County Limerick. We would like it renamed Mars Cross eventually when we outbreak the Keoghs.
Okay.
But it's a cluster of houses and
I'm
bungalows.
cracking up already. Carry on, yeah.
I've one more before we go, but
okay, we've got a crossroads anyway, right?
We've got a crossroads, but we've got
do?
a lot of Keoghs there, which is an example of, if you don't mind all the Keoghs, but it's an example of extended families wishing to live together. We live there because my wife was a rural dweller and we wish to live with our extended family. I don't think rural Ireland is on the way out at all. I grew up in my teenage years in New Ross in Wexford, and I would have seen, I counted in my head in the car on the way up, about a dozen former friends, you know, from school days and that, who left and came to the Pale and probably liked it in their 20s. They've returned to New Ross, a town that, you know, would have been economically
dead enough.
It's not dead enough, no. New Ross is going good. You had, look, Dennis North was all over the radio last week, 871 for coming out with an A1 in history. That's no accident. I mean, people have a spirit.
That'll butter a lot of parsnips, I suppose. No, I mean, what are you actually advocating? I mean, like, apart from sentiment, what are you saying?
Apart from sentiment, that sentiment is real though. Back to Limerick, like, I mean, I took the kids, and I'm giving you anecdotes, but I took the kids for a GA Blitz in Ballylanders last week for an hour and a half. We were there for 8 hours, like, and there was a festival on. Didn't know anyone. Jeez, we knew them all by the time we left. And that spirit is what brings people back to the rural areas.
At the end of the day, people want to live where they have a chance of work. The work is in the cities.
No, the work isn't in the cities entirely. Work is no longer a place. I mean, Mike and I talk about the digital divide, but work is where you can do it, and you can do a heck of a lot of your work in a rural area for any kind of work. Okay, farming is obviously tied to the produce.
Are you saying broadband?
Broadband, yes, it is an issue. But let's talk about the solutions. I mean, just Donegal, our reporters in Changing Ireland, they're fabulous guys. A lot of people writing for it to be community workers, so they're writing about the stuff they know. In Donegal, where you've, and we've more tragedy in the last few days, but high numbers of young people dying on the roads, they came up with a programme there, community-based, that saw 70 offenders sign up for a programme, and they have not re-offended since.
Okay.
So that's not creating employment, but it's addressing a very real need in the community. In Ballyhowra, you can buy everything from apple juice to fruit compote produced locally. So that's local jobs in the area. You can rent a kitchen by the hour. Enterprise difficulties are they're surmounted by local development companies.
Michael, I'm sure you have a list along your arm to say Kilorgan, but what do you think a government can practically do? I mean, we have the list. You want more Garda stations kept open, more post offices kept open, you want more health facilities. Is it as simple as that? Is it just public services you're looking for?